Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, the Knife Raven here, back again with another video. And in today's video, well, it's been nearly 3 weeks of nothing from me, but here I am again, returning to bring you a very, very special knife. And I know, I say that a lot, but this time, that title is more than justified. For today, I will be showcasing another member of the Tailor's Eyewitness Premier Collection. Now, these are spectacular knives that many have talked about before. And whether you just simply have watched videos about these on YouTube, or, well, perhaps you even own one, or you've been told about them by friends, family, these are very nice knives with a great reputation. And while I should say they are never always going to be perfect, and, well, that is to be expected with any manufacturer or maker. There will be times when the knife just doesn't turn out terribly well, and that is always a possibility, but Tailor's Eyewitness and their Premier Collection seem to have minimized the likelihood of this happening, and they have a very consistent quality level that you can almost always expect. And because of this, they make some of the very best traditional style knives today. So, which particular pattern are we discussing now? Well, for my long-term channel viewers, you will know that just like the Arthur Wright Ettricks, there is a Tailor's Eyewitness pattern that I particularly like, and that if I don't curb my purchasing of, will very quickly spiral into an addiction, which it may have already done. And that is the Slim Barlow, also known as the Gentleman's Clip. These are very small, slimline little knives with very high polishes on everything, relatively high price tags, and very good fit and finish. Now, the reason I like these so much is because they feature the same style and, well, design of a Barlow, except in a much thinner and less chunky package. So, today I'll be taking a look at another one of them, and this one blows the others completely out of the water. And I'm going to preface this by saying the camera will not do this knife justice, and that is just a fact that I'm going to have to accept. But anyways, without further ado, here is the box. Typical Eyewitness box here with the Premier Collection and their logo in gold. You have your model number, and below Ironwood WB, which stands for Worked Back. This is my first Slim Barlow with file work. Here included as well, you have your warranty card and description of the brand. If you wish, you may pause it. And also the signature of the craftsman. This was made by A. Smith, or Adam Smith. On the other side, you have your care and maintenance, and also your contact information. So there you are. Now, without further ado, here is the knife. Will you just have a look at that? This knife is, again, part of the Slim Barlow design collection, and I must say, the look and feel of this one is on another level entirely. Very few knives that I have ever handled have the same quality feel to them. And I know the term feeling quality is a bit, well, it's a bit cliche, and sometimes when you pick up a knife, you might think it feels like it is of good quality, but it isn't, or vice versa. But this knife, I think, very much bears that title. as it really does just feel like a little piece of fine artistic craftsmanship. And these are, again, entirely handmade. So this was an artisan-made piece, and I think, based on the ridiculous levels of mirror polish, I'm going to get on the dusting glove. I only have one today, but at least this will somewhat minimize the amount of fingerprints here. But, as always, you have your nickel-silver mirror-polished bolster, your brass pins, your brass liners, which are, again, polished to go with everything else. You have this lovely, lovely stainless steel back spring with the hand-done file work. And it always impresses me how perfect they managed to get these, considering these are not CNC machined. There isn't some tool that cuts this pattern in. No, this is someone sitting at a bench with a file and carving these patterns into the spring. And the fact that they always look this nice is truly a testament to how skilled these craftsmen are. But absolutely beautiful. And one thing about Eyewitness that I quite like is they let the file work continue all the way to the back of the spring, and also up onto the blade. Before we take a look at the blade, I'll give you a quick glance at the handles. And again, the camera will not do this justice, but this is the nicest Desert Ironwood I have had the privilege of handling. It has a lovely, lovely autumn brown color to it, with almost these chocolatey notes, and it really, really is stunning. But again, I must apologize, as the camera really just can't pick that up. But I'm hoping that at least you can see it and recognize that it looks nice, even if you can't see the depth of how nice it really looks. Here is the other side, which is arguably nicer. Seeing if you can pick up on that grain. But again, absolutely beautiful. Desert Ironwood is the favorite material of Lee White, the main craftsman of Taylor's Eyewitness, and he's told me before that it's his favorite material to work with, and it oftentimes has the most variety in the grain, which I can agree with. I only have 3 knives with Desert Ironwood, and they all look completely different. Ah, there you are. Now you can see the grain a bit more. But anyhow, before I open it up, I guess I'll give you your comparisons. Here it is next to the first Slim Barlow I got. This one's in buffalo horn. Very simple material, doesn't have much detail in it, just has this nice sheen. And here we have the closest contender, which is a 2-blade model of the Slim Barlow. This was the last one I discussed. And this is in Amboina burlwood, or Amboina burr. Just give you a bit of a view from here. Same design with all 3 of these, except the one on the right with the extra pen blade. And again, just lovely, lovely materials here. One thing that Taylor's Eyewitness does that I absolutely adore is they genuinely seem to care about the materials that they use on their knives, and I'm convinced that some of the very best grains and patterns come from Taylor's Eyewitness knives. But here you are. You can see the other side. And there you go. This one, of course, despite its beauty, has unfortunately had an accident, and you can see that chip there. That was the aftermath of a rogue back spring that decided to snap, and it flew a few, maybe inches, maybe a foot away, and took that big old chip right out of the side of that handle. So, little warning, if you have really expensive knives or just anything that you don't want to be stabbed with a flying back spring, well, keep it away from your back springs that decide to take flight. Although, that isn't something you should normally need to worry about. Anyways, here is the knife also next to its larger companion. This is the Barlow by Eyewitness. And this model also features Desert Ironwood, but it's an even darker piece, and the grain is even harder to pick up on. But believe it or not, those two feature the exact same handle material and are made in the same factory. But I personally prefer the Slim Barlow, and I know that that's probably an unpopular opinion. I love the Barlow, but the feel of the Slim Barlow is a lot more smooth and slimline in the hand, and I generally prefer slimmer knives, again with the Etrix and such. So it's no surprise that I prefer this model, but I still really like the Barlow, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's looking for a higher-end Barlow-type knife. Taylor's Eyewitness would probably be my first pick if I had to recommend a quality Barlow. But again, back to the Slim Barlow. It's been much longer than I'd hoped, but here's the blade. I tend to waffle on a bit. Seems to just be a thing. Beautiful mirror polish on this blade. It's a complete hand mirror, as is expected with the Premier collection. Very, very well-ground clip point blade. It's not so noticeable in the dip that it becomes, as I like to say, an aggressive clip point, but at the same time, it is pronounced enough that you can certainly tell what kind of blade this is. There's no mistaking this for a Wharncliffe or a drop point. Very nice nail nick, well ground into the blade. It's deep enough to make opening quite easy, although you can just as easily pinch the knife open. Spring tension is stiff, but not uncomfortable. I'd give it a 6, and my tolerance for spring tension is probably higher than most, so I'd probably say this would be a 7. If you aren't used to terribly tough springs, maybe an 8. But definitely not the kind of spring I'd worry about, I don't know, breaking. But 420 HC on blade steel, which I know some will complain about and say it isn't super steel, it isn't high-end enough. And no, it is not super steel, but for a traditional small pocket knife that you aren't going to be abusing or putting any tough use into, that is more than enough. But 420 HC is easy to sharpen, it takes a very fine edge, and has decent corrosion resistance. It's not perfect, but at the same time, it is far better than any carbon steel. So, decent corrosion resistance, good enough for sharpening, and holds an okay edge, but again, the edge retention is probably not M390 level, as you would expect, but it'll get the job done for the kind of knife this is. File work continues on to the blade again, and the transition from spring to blade is very, very nice. You can see a little line in between the two, but it definitely doesn't look messy or, sloppy in its construction. Blade play is absolutely non-existent, as it is on all Taylor's Eyewitness knives. I've never had blade play on any of them. But beautiful work on the inside. Normally the insides of knives are very, very dirty and seldom cleaned before being sent out of the factory, but this is almost spotless, and in fact is also polished on the inside, which is a very rare thing to see. No stop pin, unfortunately, and that is my biggest consistent complaint with these knives. Unfortunately, they do tend to get blade wrap, and again, that isn't the fault of the maker. That is the fault, I believe, of the design, because I've had Barlows and Lambfoots from Taylor's Eyewitness, and they've never had blade wrap, but every single Slim Barlow that I have has had at very least a little bit of chipping right about there. And I would say that that's probably because the blade does tend to be a bit more wide at the front, and there isn't anything at the tang to really stop it. So my recommendation is just walk the blade down, be very careful with it, and you should have no issues. But if you intend to snap it shut, well, I'm just warning you, there's a very good chance you will have a dent in your blade. Although with the Barlows, again, there is absolutely no worry of that, and you can feel free to snap shut as much as you like. I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but I guess you have your stamp here. It's a very small stamp. It's well enough, put in well enough that you can still sort of read it, although the camera doesn't want to focus. It's got the eye logo, the all-seeing eye of God, and then below that, Witness, Sheffield, England. The stamp could be a bit more clear, but it isn't exactly impossible to read. The Barlow does tend to have a larger stamp, also a larger blade, and you can probably make that out a bit easier. Again, provided the camera wishes to focus. There you are, Eyewitness, Sheffield, England, and it's also stamped on both of the bolsters, which is something I actually quite like. It differentiates the Eyewitness Barlow from any other. And in fact, one thing that I would like to say, and I don't know if anyone from Taylor's Eyewitness is perhaps watching this, but if they are, I would like to say, I do remember seeing the Slim Barlow with the Barlow's bolster style, which is to say stainless steel as opposed to nickel silver, and also this very boxy, square style as opposed to the rounded and much more simple style. And I personally, while I very much enjoy this particular knife and really everything about its appearance, I would very much like to see a return, perhaps, of the old bolster. And again, this is by no means a complaint, or I'm not saying that you should completely scrap this style. I still think it looks wonderful. But I'm very curious to see how that would change, perhaps, the appearance of one of these knives. But again, there is no need for that. It's just me being curious as to what that would look like. But again, it's not a flaw or an issue by any means. But all in all, this is a very, very well put together knife. The pins are perfectly flush. The bolsters are buttery smooth. There is no visible or physical transition here. You cannot really feel or see anything. Simply spectacular. Same on this side. Everything is just sanded to perfection. Again, the spring isn't raised. It isn't proud. The file work lines up perfectly. The handles are symmetrical, or I shouldn't say perfectly symmetrical. If you want to be very, very picky, there's a slight difference on this side. It's a little taller than this one, but again, that's a very, 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 very slight difference. So I will point it out, but it is close to symmetrical. The blade itself isn't warped. It's almost perfect. It's just a little bit of a bend at the pivot, but I have been informed that that does happen as a means of centering the blade within the liners. So it's definitely not warped, and I'm not going to complain about it, particularly when comparing it to the other Slim Barlows that I have, which are far more noticeable in their bend, as you can see with this one, which is very clearly biased to the right. But speaking of centering, I don't believe I showcased that. Centering here is pretty much perfect. One could argue that the camera doesn't want to focus. It is a little bit off to the right, but again, I don't think that's enough to exactly consider it a fault, but it is worth mentioning. Very, very close, though. There we are. But gapping is... there isn't much gapping here. The file work does a very good job of concealing gaps, but it is worth mentioning that when you hold it up to the light, you can see that there is a bit of gapping on this side, which is unfortunate, but again, I have to be fair with these, as they are fairly expensive. In fact, scratch that, they are expensive. And they are handmade, but handmade should not be an excuse for bad craftsmanship. Although, it should be expected that there are going to be little slight imperfections when you buy a knife that has no real machined process within it. There is no assembly line or CNC grinding. It's just a craftsman sitting at a bench and gathering the materials, assembling them, sanding them, polishing them, and sharpening the finished product. So again, I will say this knife isn't perfect. There are slight imperfections here, little bits of gapping. There is the ever so slight bend in the blade, and there is the slightly imperfect alignment of the covers and bolsters. But at the same time, I will say that stepping back and looking at this knife as a complete product, I think it is absolutely exemplary. And I really cannot put into words how happy with this knife that I am. And I would almost go as far to say, and this is a very big stretch, that this would be in my top 10 favorite knives. And I'm not going to state this as a fact, but possibly even top 5. It feels wonderful in the hand, full 4-finger grip. That little bit of tang that's unsharpened is just spectacular to choke up with. This makes for an excellent slicer. It is razor sharp out of the box, and just the appearance of it is simply stunning. So, as a whole, I will say, yes, I am biased. I really, really like this knife. Does that mean I might be overlooking some flaws that others might not be able to overlook? Yes, and I will state that this is not perfect. There are gaps. The blade is ever so slightly off. And The alignment is not quite perfect. Now, to me, though, this does not ruin or even bring the knife down at all. In fact, I still, personally, on a personal level, this knife is practically perfect. And I will never be getting rid of this knife. I won't be trying to get any kind of refund or return or anything like that. This is staying in my collection, and if I ever stop being afraid of scratching it, I might end up carrying it consistently. But again, Adam Smith, who was not that long ago just considered an apprentice maker, is now making knives on par with Lee White. And Lee White is Taylor's lead maker. Again, he was the fellow who made the Barlow here. And the majority of Taylor's knives I have are made by Lee White. For example, this slim clip, this Barlow, and this Slim Barlow. The only other knife besides this one that was made by Adam Smith, at least that I know of, would be this knife right here, which is a buffalo horn Barlow. And this one was a little bit rougher around the edges. It had more flaws than this one, or even this more recent knife here. And so just seeing that this knife was made, I believe, early 2023, and now seeing a knife that was presumably made mid-2023, the difference is noticeable. The quality on this one, while still probably much higher than a lot of case knives or maybe even Ottermesser and coming close to Boker, this knife still was far from perfect. This one is a lot closer, and it's only been a few months since this knife was made. So I think that Adam Smith, if he keeps going like this, he might develop the same, well, legend status that Lee White has managed to achieve. And I wish him the very best of luck, as anyone who can make something like this not only has a bright future ahead of them in knife making, but also clearly just they have a talent, they have skill, and they really are a true artisan, because this is simply wonderful. And despite its flaws, I am going to give this knife, at least for me, I would say 10 out of 10. I am completely smitten with this. And again, I might be wrong in that. I might be overlooking some issues that others couldn't, but that's okay. This is for me. This is my collection. And I am bringing it to you, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying these videos, but at the end of the day, this is really just a documentation of my collection, and, well, I'm bringing the best of it that I can to you, and giving some thoughts and mediocre analysis to go along with them. So for me, this is a winner, and whether or not you think that it's a winner is entirely up to you. And if you think that this knife is a winner, I can actually point you in the direction of a store that sells these, and they ship to North America. In fact, they are based in North America, and it is a store I've talked about a couple times, and it is called Fendrihon. I will put the link in the description after I finish this video. And Fendrihon has two websites, .ca, which is the one I purchased from, and .com. .com is for USA residents, and .ca is mainly for Canada. And their prices are, while still expensive, as these knives are always going to be expensive, they are far lower here than anywhere else that I have ever seen. I know of a few retailers in Sheffield that sell these knives. One that I do like is the famous Sheffield shop, which is where I got this Barlow. But despite their outstanding customer service, their prices are still a bit high. Same is to be said with, say, Sheffield Trading, which I believe is affiliated with the famous Sheffield shop. Bakewell Cookshop, which is a favorite that I've been told many great things about. And also James & Company off of the All About Pocket Knives forum, although they only ship within the US. But despite this, and I'm sure all of those retailers are wonderful and people have had good experiences with them, when it comes to buying Taylor's Eyewitness Premier knives, I will always stick with Fendrihon. I have no affiliation with them, and I'm not being sponsored or paid to say this. I bought this knife entirely on my own. This was not given to me. So this isn't a sponsorship. This is just me giving a bit of a shout out to a company I really, really love. So if you want one of these and you want one for a good price, and you live in North America and don't want to go through the hassle of ordering from Sheffield, please go check out Fendrihon. They have quite a few of these left in stock. And I believe they have the mother of pearl, ram's horn, ox horn, buffalo, and they have the two-blade version of this knife in Desert Ironwood. So if you're interested, please go check them out. And, well, I hope you have the same great luck that I did here. As again, this is simply outstanding, and I'll probably be getting another one of these eventually. I'm thinking either ram's horn or mother of pearl, but I just got two of them recently. I think I'm going to wait a little. Don't want the addiction to develop too quickly. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and I'm sorry that this video took half hour, and I'm sorry that it became a ramble fest by the end. But I don't know what else to say. This is absolutely brilliant. I love this knife. So thank you very much for watching. This has been the Taylor's Eyewitness Slim Barlow, aka Gentleman's Clip in Desert Ironwood and Filework by Mr. Adam Smith. And this is the Knife Raven. As always, signing off. Goodbye.